What's up, guys? It's Reynad back, and today we're going to be talking about design space in the Bazaar. So for the longest time, what we thought we had to do to get our game closer to completion is to build out the card sets for each of our playable classes. And as we started doing this and creating new cards one by one, we found that it was harder and harder to design new cards that felt unique. We started recycling mechanics that were already on other cards, but just using different numbers. And that didn't feel like as interesting of a game as it could be if all the cards were unique and not so redundant. Our game didn't have enough design space. So this problem kind of snuck up on us because we only could see it when we started making cards for a game rule set that we already designed. One of the big goals for any game designer is to increase the amount of design space in their game without increasing the complexity. Now, it's actually a pretty hard thing to do because a lot of times the easiest way to increase the design space of your game is to make it more complex. At the end of the day, we want the Bazaar to be easy to learn, difficult to master. We want there to be a low barrier of entry to getting into the game, so we don't want to make it too complex out of the gate. A card game could add another type of resource that cards need to use to get played. And suddenly, that resource gives you this lever, like mana cost or anything else, or attack or health, that you can tweak to make your card stand out from other cards in your game.
Real-time games like MOBAs or first-person shooter games have a lot of design space that strategy games just don't get to use. Those games get to make unique weapons and characters that have shapes, cooldowns, ranges, and sizes that are just different from other games. A lot of the design space in games is built into the basic rules that they've laid out, so the players never really have to think about how to make design space in a game. All the time, players think about what weapons they would add or abilities they would add to the game, but it's really easy to add things to a game that's already done. Building the structure of the game is actually very difficult. That's why design space is so often overlooked. It's because it's built into the fundamentals of the game, way before they ever get to the specific abilities or weapons or characters. To figure out how to expand our own game's design space, we started looking at other strategy games. We wanted to know how they created their design space.
Traditional deck builders didn't have a lot. There's only a certain amount of unique effects that you can put on your cards before you run out of unique cards that you can make. Traditional trading card games, on the other hand, had a ton of design space. They had all these different timings on the cards and the permanents in their game. They had different speeds that you can play your cards at. They had mana cost, which let the same effect be put on cards that are both cheap and fast, but also big and effective and expensive. We wanted our game to have the design space that these trading card games did, but without all of the complexity of needing to memorize a million different types of permanents and card types. If you look at another great card game, Dominion, the first deck building game ever, they actually don't have that much design space, and it's still a great game despite it. A game like Dominion is very hard to make 500 cards that all feel meaningfully different from one another. In order to keep making unique cards after we ran out of ideas for them, we started introducing new effects. Maybe we'd introduce poisonous or freezing or something, and this is an effect that could go on maybe 24 cards in the game. It did add design space, but not in a very efficient way, because every single one of these new effects that we introduced came with new rules that our players had to learn.
Let's say we have two different card games, and they both only have card types, colors, timings, and effects. The types could be items and spells, the colors could be blue and red, the timings could be when cards come into play, when they leave play, and effects can be things like damage, healing, draw cards, freezing, etc. In the first game, we have 2 card types, 5 colors, 2 timings for the effects to happen, and 500 effects. They put every effect they could possibly think of into this game. This first game has 10,000 possible cards that they can put into it. In order to play this game, a player needs to learn 509 rules. They need to know what the types are, the colors, the timings, and 500 different effects. Now let's say we had a second game that had 10 card types, 10 colors, 10 different timings that the effects could happen, and only 10 effects in the game. When you multiply this out, there's 10,000 possible cards that can be put into this game, but they only have 40 rules that a player has to learn. Game 1 is the bad way to create design space. You have way too many rules for how many possibilities you create. You want to use all of the different axes that you've built into your game. Game 2 does a much better job of this. It's perfectly even, so a minimum number of game elements can create a maximum amount of design space. Our game used to look like this Game 1. We had a ton of effects, and whenever we needed more design space, we would just add more effects. We'd add more things the cards can do, like burning or freezing or poison. And we realized over time that this is the least effective way to add design space. A much better way to increase design space is to increase the types or timings, the fundamentals that you've built into the game. But it's much harder to do this later in the process. We started looking for ways to increase the least used aspects of our game design. This is why we thought we had to make cards stay in play. When cards stay in play, they have a bunch of timings that naturally get introduced as they come into play, as they leave play. They can have effects that are ongoing while they're in play, auras. They can have triggers that happen on custom events. There's a bunch of timings that introduce. It's a new axis that we can multiply into our design space equation.
We want the Bazaar to be cross-platform and mobile, and that means we don't want a million tiny numbers on screen and small font everywhere. We wanted the UI to be minimalist, clean, simple, straightforward. And that means that, our cards don't have that many numbers on them, and since we don't have that many numbers on them, we don't have as many levers as other games would.
The Bazaar had like 3 card types, 1 timing, and 25 effects. And if you multiplied out the number of cards we could make, it was really pitiful.
Compared to Magic, our game had way less design space. Magic had all sorts of different timings that they could put for effects on their cards. When something dies, when it comes into play, at the end of turn. But in our game, it was a traditional deck building game still. Cards were flowing from the draw pile to the discard pile, and they were being drawn to the hand every single turn. Once they're in your hand, you would play them, and that's when you would get the effect. 1 timing on play. We could put some delayed triggers on effects off of cards, but really it just made the game confusing, not more fun. So we had just the 1 timing, and it was issues like this that we wanted to zoom out and try to address.
When you're making your own game, you have to be aware of all the different levers you have to pull to make your ideas a reality.
We added a new design axis to our cards, which is durability. Suddenly we could have cards that have 1 durability, other cards that have 15, and even though these cards have similar effects, they feel very different from one another. We also introduced different sizes to our items. In our new game engine, we had a finite amount of board space, so big items took up more of it and had a very real drawback compared to small items. This gave us a way of introducing a pseudo mana cost to our cards without literally doing it through numbers that we add. In a later video, we'll dive more into the different sizes of items in our game and their durabilities.
The basic framework of your game needs to accommodate a ton of different ideas.
The better that you make that framework, the easier it is to fill the rest of the game. The design space issue is one that we battled for months, and after zooming out and really studying it, we feel like we got a nice balance of simple mechanics, but wide design space. We think that the game won't be too complex to pick up easily, but at the same time, we'll be able to make hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of unique cards over the years as we keep releasing new classes and new content for you guys. Let me know what you think. Remember to sub, and we'll see you guys in the next update.